Earlier this week, on Monday in particular, we saw a stock like MP Materials jump on the idea that there could be potentially critical minerals and rare earths to be mined from Venezuela. I want to talk to you about the reality of that right now. Is there any of that mining going on right now? Do we have a sense of how many of these critical minerals are actually there in Venezuela?
Venezuela has minerals, but they're not necessarily rare earths. So, for example, the biggest commodity that investors are looking at right now is actually gold. When you take the 25 biggest gold mines in Venezuela that we have data for, it actually makes it the fifth biggest reserves of gold in the world, even ahead of China. At a time when we're feeling particularly bullish about gold, that's quite a good outlook. However, when we look at some of the other minerals that we think of more strategic, more critical, your rare earths, your coltan, your bauxite, the reality is there's a long way to go. And some of this is that, between Hugo Chavez and then Maduro, a lot of mining investment left. Last year, Venezuela only attracted $200,000 of mineral exploration, which is less than 0.01%. So it's been a number of years since the private sector really looked at Venezuela. So we're going to need to go in and do some real exploration before we can make some of these assessments.
Okay, so they do have some critical minerals there. It's not rare earths, critical minerals. Gold is one of the things they have there. You also mentioned bauxite. So we're starting to learn more and more this year when it comes to some of these trade disputes and some other actions about things that we don't generally talk about. So bauxite's used when it comes to aluminum. It's also in a lot of household items that we have in our house, like appliances and things like that. But how attractive is that? How profitable would it be to go down there and mine that? And we were just talking about U.S. oil companies saying that they need security and financial guarantees. What would it take for miners to go down there? And what would it actually just make it, just bottom line it, worth their while?
I mean, bauxite can be an extremely lucrative commodity also because when we refine bauxite, we get gallium. And gallium is a commodity that we need for semiconductors and for which China has already imposed export restrictions. Previously, Venezuela had one operating bauxite mine. It's a great mine, 5 million tons of capacity. The difficulty was, though, is that over the last decade, Venezuela's governance of this project, so there was nationalization of the mines under Hugo Chavez in 2011, massive erosion of power infrastructure. Mining, particularly bauxite mining, is quite energy intensive. So what happened is eventually this went from a really good bauxite mine to a non-operating asset. So there would need to be a lot of investment just to bring this project back online.
All right. It's one thing to have very valuable resources there. It's another thing to get to them and get to them in a safe way. And I think that's what some of the oil companies were highlighting. A lot of people have highlighted some of the, turmoil that exists in Venezuela right now and some of the issues of, potentially Colombia having some influence over the country and other, what I'll just call rebel groups, just to kind of sum it all up. When we're looking at this opportunity compared to what's going on in Ukraine or even the Democratic Republic of Congo, how much safer, more dangerous is Venezuela compared to those other areas where there is pretty active mining of very critical minerals, specifically the Democratic Republic of Congo, which seems to have a lot of this, what I'm going to call rebel activity as well?
The big difference between the DRC, Ukraine, and Venezuela is the DRC is a very established mining sector. And the mining area of the DRC is a place called Katanga. And Katanga is very far away from where a lot of this conflict is. You're talking about 10 hours plus on the road to get there. So in a way, there's a level of protection in Katanga, pretty stable, pretty safe. I spent quite a bit of time there. When you go to Ukraine, they have a long history of mining. I mean, they used to be one of the biggest titanium producers in the world. So there's a legacy of mining that we can there's a muscle memory we can go back to with a little bit of investment. The difficulty with Venezuela, number one, is the majority of the mining sector is either controlled by the state, which, as you know, is quite a challenging place to do business, or it's by armed militias. And the armed militias are rampant in the mining region, which means that you have a lot of crime, human rights abuse, environmental degradation, and not an area necessarily where large multinational mining companies with a reputation to uphold want to be.
I think it leads us to our next question, Greenland. The president's been talking a lot about Greenland. We had the Secretary of State go to Congress and say, well, the administration wants to buy it. Then the administration put out a statement that said military actions not ruled out. What is in Greenland that's especially lucrative, and how feasible is it to get those minerals out of the ground there?
Greenland has great minerals. So when we look at rare earths being the big resource that we have lost access to over the last year owing to Chinese export controls, Greenland has about 1.5 million tons of rare earths, and they have two of the biggest rare earth deposits in the world. And these are particularly well endowed with heavy rare earths, which are specifically the type of rare earths that China restricted. But again, this is not a country that is going to give the United States rare earths in the next 6 months, year, or 2 years. Greenland has less than 200 miles of roads, very limited energy infrastructure. 80% of Greenland is under ice. So it's a country that has a lot of long term mining potential, but is not going to meet our minerals needs tomorrow.